So this morning we do tell the history, a history that is important to Unitarian Universalists all around the world. And I'll tell you, this story is truly imprinted in my heart. It's imprinted in my mind, and it informs my vision of Unitarian Universalism, something that I try to embody and pass on to future generations who will inherit our message of liberating love. Now, this history is a story of many things, but it's also a story of curiosity, which is our worship theme this month. A story is about two people whose curiosity led them to envision a new universal ritual that could help people embrace their differences and their commonalities. It's a story of how, at a time of increasing tension, in time of division in the country, and a time of rising authoritarianism, people came together to remind each other of their humanity. And so this is the story of the Unitarian Universalist flower communion. Now, there's at least one person every time I say communion who cringes. Communion, it's one of those religious words. Think of this. Communion is simply a word that means sharing. So every time I say communion, it's just sharing, and this is a story about sharing. Norbert Čapek was born in 1870 in the country that we now call the Czech Republic, but at the time was called Bohemia, and the people who lived there were Bohemians. Norbert Čapek's family was too poor to send him to school, so they sent Norbert to live with his uncle Victor in Vienna, Austria. Norbert's uncle was a tailor, and Norbert worked as his assistant. That way he was able to earn money to pay for school because Norbert liked to learn. In school, he studied science, psychology, and philosophy, and Norbert, like many of us, began to ask many questions about religion. Questions that challenged the faith in which he was being raised. Norbert asked, why does one person get to be in charge of the entire church and speak as the voice of God? He asked, why are men the only ones allowed to be priests? Why are only men in charge? He thought patriarchy, not a good thing. And he also asked, why can't there be a church that celebrates our differences instead of trying to make us all think the same way? Now, Norbert's uncle did not like that his nephew asked questions. He felt that it was dangerous. He said, if you want to make it in the world, then you better keep your mouth shut and your mind closed. That's how you survive. Thank you. I'll give you the $5 I promised if you would boo right then. Now, in some ways, the time and place in which Norbert lived wasn't all that different from what we see unfolding in our country. Some people don't like it if we ask questions, and here in the Central Valley, many people, many of our neighbors have been taught to feel threatened by difference. So when Norbert grew to be an adult, he still hadn't figured out a way to be spiritual that felt authentic to him. For some of us, it takes well into our adulthood till we discover that. Some of us never do. Remember, Norbert liked to learn, so he was always in the library. One day, he was sitting in the library reading the newspapers because he liked to know what was going on, and he noticed a woman also sitting in the library, also reading newspapers. Somehow, Norbert knew he had to meet her. He took a chance. He introduced himself. He said, hi, I'm Norbert Čapek, or some such thing. The woman responded, hi, Norbert. It's good to meet you. I'm Maya Veronica Altavec. As they talked together, they realized that they had a similar interest in developing themselves intellectually. They liked ideas. They both were on their own individual search for truth and meaning. They both wondered, could this be a search they could share together? Norbert decided to take a risk and share his spiritual struggles, to be vulnerable with Maya, not knowing if she would run screaming for the door. But Maya replied, Norbert, it is not as complicated as you are making it. I think you might just be a Unitarian. Norbert responded, what's a Unitarian? Maya smiled and said something like this. Unitarians respect each person's individual spiritual search for truth and meaning. They believe that all life is interconnected and interdependent, which means that Unitarians are called to prioritize and protect the most vulnerable among us. Unitarians affirm the inherent dignity and worthiness of all people. They respect diversity and difference and see that as a spiritual strength. Unitarians, perhaps above all, teach us that we need not think alike to love alike. Let's say that together. We need not think alike to love alike. Norbert's response was succinct. He said, if that's what it means to be a Unitarian, sign me up. After that, Maya and Norbert fell in love. How could they not? They got married. And then together, they decided something pretty radical. They decided to become Unitarian ministers. They went to seminary, and after several hard years of study and work, they were ordained. Maya and Norbert were officially Reverend Maya and Reverend Norbert. Now, at that time, which was just over 100 years ago, there were very few female Unitarian ministers. We could also say there were very few female ministers at all. Maya was a trailblazer. She was a pioneer. She helped break a glass ceiling in a faith tradition that today, 100 years later, has more female ministers in it than male ministers. And I might add, also ordain openly non-binary folks as well. It's 1921. We're in Prague, in what is now called the Czech Republic. Maya and Norbert started a Unitarian church together. People from many different religions and backgrounds came to this newfangled church. They came because they wanted to be part of a community that taught religious values that made sense and resonated with them. They wanted to be part of a spiritual community because they didn't want to face the complexities, the uncertainties of the world all by themselves. They knew trouble was brewing, and they wanted companions for the journey, companions who cared about making a more loving and justice-filled world. This was 3 years after the end of World War I. The trauma, death, and destruction of what at the time was called the war to end all wars, right? That trauma and destruction was all around them. In the aftermath, Maya and Norbert wanted to do something that would bring people together and remind them that even in the most brutal and soul-crushing of times, there was still beauty and hope in the world. They wanted to create a ritual that was open to everybody, no matter their religious background or spiritual beliefs. They wanted a ritual that would let people love inclusively. One momentous May morning, not unlike this morning, Maya looked out their church window and noticed flowers growing in the church garden. Maya said to Norbert, "These flowers remind me of beauty. These flowers remind me of hope. Maybe our new ritual could be created and be based on flowers." Maya continued in words summarized by Fred Small. In the ugliness of oppression, flowers celebrate the eternal hope of freedom. In the face of cruelty after cruelty, they speak of courage. In a meadow, they speak of freedom, creating patterns wild and breathtaking that no gardener can match. In their indescribable beauty, flowers remind us that we live always in the face of ineffable mystery. And in their reappearance each year, flowers remind us that despite the hardships of life, life does go on. And so Maya and Norbert together created the Flower Communion. They asked everybody at their church to bring a flower with them that morning. They arrived and everyone was invited to place their flowers into a giant vase. Placing the flowers in the vase represented that each person came into this church by their own free will. No one forced them. No fear of hell made them sit here. They came because their spirit wanted to be here. Then they had the children of the church carry the vase very carefully to the front of the church where they put it on a table. And the congregation, not the minister, but the congregation then blessed the flowers together. After the service, as people prepared to leave, they went to the vase and each took a flower different from the one that they had brought with them. So this begs the question, what did this flower communion symbolize? Well, it symbolizes many different things. First, no two flowers are the same. Together, the many different flowers form a beautiful bouquet. This bouquet would not be the same without each individual flower, and it's the same with us. Our church would not be the same without each one of us here. No matter how different we might be, we are all beautiful in God's eyes, for we are all part of the great bouquet of creation. We are, in the end, all different, beautiful, and one. And when we leave this service with a flower brought by someone else, probably somebody you don't even know, it is this beautiful, earthy reminder that we are connected to each other. Maya and Norbert introduced the Flower Communion 103 years ago on June 4th, 1923. The people in Norbert and Maya's church loved the Flower Communion and the caring community that it represented. Their church in Prague became the largest Unitarian church in the world with over 3,000 members. That meant a lot of flowers had to be cut for their Flower Communion. But then those clouds that were threatening descended. Adolf Hitler and the Nazis took control of Prague and Bohemia. Immediately, thank you, let's all boo that. And maybe just a boo for authoritarians everywhere. Immediately, Maya and Norbert's church was labeled dangerous by the invading fascists. The Nazis obviously did not want a church like the Chopiks. They did not want that Flower Communion celebrated. They did not want Maya and Norbert preaching the Unitarian message that all people are beautiful in God's eyes. They didn't want anybody teaching that all people are sacred beings, diverse in culture, experience, and theology. They did not want people to embrace differences with love, curiosity, and respect. And suddenly, Maya, Norbert, and that congregation found themselves in uncharted and uncertain times. They didn't know what to do. They were frightened. They didn't know what was going to happen next. They didn't know how bad things were going to get. Was authoritarianism going to be their future? Many Unitarians in that congregation were threatened or beaten or taken from their homes and put in prison. Some Unitarians had the windows of their houses or businesses broken. Some businesses were robbed, shut down, or burned by the Nazis. Others worried that they might be the next who was going to be disappeared. The Čapeks were regularly questioned by the Gestapo, who demanded that Maya and Norbert not criticize Hitler or the Nazis during their sermons. In public, Maya and Norbert were fearful and remained silent. But they and members of their congregation formed a resistance team that met secretly in the basement of the church and helped Jews and other vulnerable people escape from Prague. But finally, despite their fear, Maya and Norbert couldn't take it anymore. In the spring of 1941, Norbert declared, "We must speak the truth and not be cowards." And so that Sunday, during his sermon, Norbert directly contradicted a hateful speech that had been given earlier in the week by Adolf Hitler. He excoriated Hitler for his lies and his cruel inhumanity. 5 days later, the Gestapo came to their home and arrested Norbert. Because of that sermon, the Nazis said it was, quote, "too dangerous for Norbert Čapek to be allowed to live," end of quote. And so that gentle soul was sent to Dachau, the concentration camp, and on his papers were stamped these instructions: Čapek's return unwanted. While at Dachau, Norbert introduced the prisoners there to the Unitarian flower communion. Each prisoner brought what flowers or weeds or grass they could find in the concentration camp to a special service. At the end of the service, the prisoners left with a flower, with a weed, even a blade of grass, different from the one that they had brought. One brought by one of their fellow prisoners that reminded them of community. The prisoners were strengthened and inspired by this inclusive Unitarian flower communion that was open to anyone, no matter their religion. They liked the simple ritual, reminded them there was still beauty and goodness in this world. After the war, survivors testified that the Unitarian minister could not have been sent to a place where he was more needed. Norbert brought hope and resilience to the Jewish, Christian, Unitarian, Muslim, Roma, lesbian, gay, and transgendered prisoners in Dachau. But his ministry ended when he was transported with other older prisoners to the section of the camp where barbaric medical experiments were being conducted on elderly prisoners. These are the last words that Norbert wrote to his beloved wife and partner in ministry, Maya. Norbert wrote, "The goal of religion is to create strong, confident, active, creative, loving persons who are happy with themselves and with nature, humanity, and the spirit of life." When news of Norbert's death at Dachau reached the United States, the American Unitarian Association president, Frederick May Elliott, wrote, "Another name is added to the list of heroic Unitarian martyrs by whose death our freedom has been bought. Ours is now the responsibility to see to it that we stand fast in liberty." And those words, dear ones, remain true in our uncertain times. Ours is now the responsibility to see to it that we stand fast for liberty. Back in Prague, it got too dangerous for Maya to remain in the city, and so she fled to the United States, where, unlike today, she was welcomed with open arms. Maya brought with her the flower communion from Prague. She first introduced it to the Unitarian Church in Cambridge, Massachusetts, but soon Maya began to travel and share the flower communion ritual with Unitarian congregations all across the country. Maya shared it because she believed that the hardest times and the most dire moments are not strong enough to rob us of our capacity to share love. Not even death can take from us the love that is shared by people. It is with us as long as we have love to offer. It's with us whenever we are open to receive love from others, by offering what we can, by making room to receive from others. We carry with us the hope for the future. Could we say that together? We carry with us the hope for the future. Que así sea, bendito sea. May it be so. Blessed be. Amen.